call the regular meeting of Cobre Board of Education into session. It is 5 o'clock. Let the minutes show that Mr. Molina, Ms. Murillo, myself, and Mr. Cordova are here. Mr. Guadiana is not. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag, the state of New Mexico, the dia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
Mr. President, can I have the floor to make a statement?
Sure.
Okay. Good afternoon, good evening. During the school board meeting of March 8, 2021, a fellow board member stated that he intended to have an election to recall me for things that he believed I had done wrong during my tenure in office. I would like to respond to the false statements about me and my family made by this board member. I have served on the Cobre board for 38 years. During this time, I have served accordingly to the bylaws, the Code of Ethics, and the New Mexico School Board Association. I have supported the Cobre District, the superintendent, the administrative staff, the certified and uncertified staff, Cobre students, the parents, the voting community, to the best of my ability and knowledge with integrity. I have been part of many decisions and been involved in policy development with pride and did what I was elected to do. The accusations made against me are all false. Nepotism. My daughter was hired in 1997 when I was not even on the Cobre board. She was hired as a quota occupational therapist. She continued to pursue her education and was promoted to various positions based on her merits. There have been nepotism complaints to the state and have been investigated by Auditor Mike Stone. No wrongdoings were found in these investigations. Appointment of a school board member. A number of applications were filed. Interviews were conducted. Mr. Molina was nominated and voted into the office. The nepotism does not apply to board members. We are not employed by the district. The vote of Mr. Molina went 3 board members voted for him and 1 did not vote. That was me. And the reason that I did not vote is because he is my son-in-law. In my term in office, I have seen husband and wife on some boards. I have seen brothers and cousins on the same boards of education in different areas of the state of New Mexico. Audit. Our committee is legal and we do our duties as required by the statute of the state of New Mexico. The audit is done and goes to the state auditor for his approval. Then it comes back to the auditor who comes to the school board meeting to explain the findings. After that, the audit becomes public information. If policies need to be developed, we, the board, with the superintendent, we work to develop policies as needed. All of these complaints and many more have no merit. They are the agenda and belief of a single board member. I always make decisions with the best interest of the school district with integrity. The district is not paying for our legal fees. We are paying for our own defense. First of all, I want to thank my family for the support that they have given me. I also want to thank the superintendent, the administrative staff, the teachers, the certified and uncertified staff for how they have supported me during this time. Also the students, parents, and community of the Cobre district. I consider you all my family. The recall would cost the Cobre board $25,000 to $30,000. It is money that the district does not have. These allegations have affected me and my family physically emotionally, and financially. Therefore, I resign my position of the Cobre Board of Education effective immediately. And here's my letter to that.
Thank you, Mr. Cordova. And I want to just say that I agree with everything that Mr. Cordova says, other than the Sabine Manera. But I have been here for 30 years, and this is the first time that I see something like this has happened to the Cobre Board. I also want to say thank you to all those who supported me all these years. And I just hope that the Cobre Board can get over this and continue to be as great as they have been in the past. And I also, Mr. Spoleta, here's a letter, resign my position immediately. Thank you very much.
Josh Spoleta. I'm assuming that with the rules of succession, me being the secretary, I will therefore be the president at this time. I would like to recommend a motion to recess for at least 20 minutes, maybe so you and I can get together and discuss what our next steps can be in regards to what just occurred.
I recommend that we take a 15-minute break.
And I would recommend that the discussions that should be held in open session, be held in open session, unless they are to consider actions of personnel that would meet the criteria of closed session. Essentially, if you're going to have a communication off record, it is conducting a closed session.
It would not be a quorum. It'd just be myself and Mr. Spoleta.
That's fine. A quorum is not needed for a closed session. It has to do with whether it's violating the Open Meetings Act.
Okay, well, Mr. Guardiana, please excuse my I guess incompetence in this. I've been thrust into this, so I'm not too familiar with it. I'm a new board member. So therefore, what do you recommend, sir, and what's your motion?
We could have a discussion here in open session about concerns that we may have that affects the agenda, the meeting.
I'd like to call a recess. Can we call a recess?
That's what I would like to do. We need to reorient and ground ourselves right now because this is kind of a bombshell. So it's something that should not be discussed in an open forum. Thank you.
Just the discussions. That's
Understood. We will discuss in an open forum.
So I recommend a 15-minute break.
that's fine.
Is there a motion? May I entertain a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, aye? Okay. Recess, 15 minutes.
Recess starts at
5:09.
Our first action item is going to be the approval of agenda items. Recommendations, Dr. Spiletta?
So I wanted to ask if we can move up 2E, approval of the 2020-2021 audit as the next item after the agenda. And then after that, move up the backpack program. Mr. Chandler is also here, and I'd like to see if we can move that up after the audit. That's 5A. So those two would occur after the approval of the agenda.
You heard the recommendation, motion entertained?
So moved.
I'll second. Motion by Mrs. Murillo, second by Mr. Guardiana. Roll call vote. Myself, yes.
Yes.
3-1. So we will move up, Mr. Stone. You're up next, sir.
Okay, guys. First of all, sorry guys, I'm a little bit in shock. I'm trying to get it back together here. The delay in the release of the audit gained us one thing, and it's later here. We got an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which is as good as we can get, which means that we don't have a situation where it would have any effect on bond issues or anything else, grants or anything else. You also have an unmodified opinion on compliance with federal program regulations in terms of spending Title I monies and that sort of stuff. That is, again, as good as it can get. So that those two things in the long run are going to be the most important things to the districts. Okay. As to the comments, I'm assuming that each of you has had a chance to look these over. I don't know if you want me to go through each one by one, or if you would prefer to just ask me on specific questions about those. They've been discussed with the audit committee prior to this ever happening to us, the report ever being released. So it's basically what you guys prefer. I'll be happy to go over every one if you want to, or I can just discuss with you things that you have questions on related to those comments.
So are the comments you referring to the recommendations or the findings?
The findings.
Okay. I think we'd like you to go through each
Yeah,
one.
if you could go to the findings. I was not privy to that since I was gone for the last.
I'm sorry, I
Couple
forgot
of
about
meetings,
that.
so
Okay,
yes.
all right. Okay.
No idea.
Okay, the first, and these comments start on page 89. Okay. The first one is reconciliation of bank accounts, which we consider a material weakness. And that is that the bank accounts were not reconciled when we first got here. And they also did not agree to the general ledger. In other words, the operational fund might have said we had X number of dollars in it, or all of them said we had X number of dollars in all the cash accounts, but that did not reconcile to the cash that was showing in our general ledger. Okay.
That's 7 out of 9 accounts.
Yes, sir, originally.
And this is a repeat finding going back 4 years at least.
If you look at the, if you look at the finding itself, where it says 2021-001 on page 89, the bottom of page 89, the original finding, when the finding originated, is what I'm trying to say, is in parentheses, and it would be that year. It refers to what finding it was in that year.
So it's 3 years repeat finding. It was 2018 and now this is the 2021. Okay,
No, actually, it would be 4 years.
4 years. Oh yeah, including that year.
Okay. When it goes through the audit comments go through the condition, what the criterion is that has not been met, the effect, the cause, and the recommendation, and then the agency response. The agency response came from the district. It did not come from us. And so it is not part of the audit process. We express no opinion on the agency response.
Okay, 2021-002 on page 90. Supervisory oversight of construction projects. Again, a material weakness.
The construction project somehow got lost in the shuffle. The ones related to the construction of the ball fields and that sort of stuff. Long story short, we paid the contractor in full before he'd ever finished the job. Okay. I think that the district has already undertaken measures to make sure that he completes that project. I don't know if it is complete. Has it been done? Okay.
Did your audit take a look at anything related to that that may not have been completed or documented in a way that it should have been?
No, sir. Mine was looking to see if there was completion of the contract, that if it was properly oversighted, properly signed off. And that's as far as I'm.
And part of that criteria would be, would you look at details such as like a punch list saying that the project was completed?
No, sir, I will not.
Okay. Nor invoices or requests for payments?
Oh, yeah, we would look at invoices and requests for payments, but the fact that it became apparent through earlier discussions, particularly along this line with the board and in the minutes and that sort of stuff, that the contractor had not completed what he was supposed to do. Now, my understanding is now he was in the process of it when I was here before. My understanding is, Joyce, that it has been completed at this point in time. Now, in terms of looking at punch lists and doing that sort of stuff, no, sir, I will not.
And I'd like to follow up on that. Last time you were here, I asked about forensic audit, and you said it had to be pretty specific about what you're looking for. So in light of this finding, could we decide to do a forensic audit on this finding,
On this particular project.
this one finding?
Certainly. I mean, you could go through and say, okay, we want to analyze from start to finish every single invoice, every single progress report, all that stuff. That would be a forensic audit. You're looking at a specific area and you're looking at it in complete detail, as opposed to a general audit when we're doing sampling and looking at the overall picture of the financial statement. Yes, that would be done.
Thank you.
Okay, fuel card usage, again, a material weakness. There was not adequate monitoring of fuel charges. Receipts are not collected from card users making balances of purchases to monthly activity reports. It's basically impossible. Purchase activity report indicate that fuel cards are used for vehicles no longer in service, and diesel fuel is purchased on gasoline fuel cards and vice versa. Now, my understanding is that, and it's the reason I have advanced understanding of this is, as you guys well know, this audit went on forever, okay? But during that period, the audit committee and upper management had access to these comments so they could act on them immediately at the time that we had that exit conference. And even in some cases, we would ask the questions and say, hey, you got to do something about it when we were here. So that's why some of these things may have had action taken on them more. Normally, if you were hearing about it at an exit conference when I had just completed the field work, I wouldn't have any information subsequently, but yes.
So in that, were there internal controls, and did you test them to see if?
Well, that's the problem. That's what I'm saying here. There weren't adequate internal controls to do that, okay?
Now, my understanding is, based on the agency response, that they implemented revised monitoring processes. Employees are required to check out gas cards from the designated card holder. The employee will submit the required receipt upon returning the gas card to the card holder, who will review the vehicle mileage and charges.
That is an excellent control.
And is that different? How did that enhance the fire control?
Well, it didn't enhance the prior control. I think it established the control.
So it repeated that recommendation.
Well, no, this one was not considered not considered a comment in prior years.
Okay.
And again, it may have been that what we tested, we just didn't find it. And this year we found it. That's just the way it is. Okay, 2021-004 on page 91. Use of restricted funds for general fund operations, which is material non-compliance. Because the district got so low on cash, they had to borrow from debt service and custodial funds to finance general operations. It's a no-no. Debt service funds are restricted specifically to debt service and should be set aside separately. Custodial funds are basically cheerleaders, class of 22, whatever. Those don't belong to us, okay? Now, what has happened is we have pooled bank accounts to some extent. And what we did was use the money in the pooled bank account, but it got to the point where operational couldn't cover it, and the debt service funds were not taken, they were borrowed, I should say, is the correct term. They were borrowed, and then when money came in from grants and that sort of stuff, the money was back there. No money got into operational in the long run in terms of spending, irregular spending of the debt service funds. They were just borrowed.
It was a shell game.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't borrow those funds.
I have a question. This one's considered material non-compliance and the others were material weaknesses. What is the difference?
Well, material weaknesses means that there's a weakness in your internal control system that has allowed these things to happen. There are 3 levels of findings. Material weaknesses are the most serious. Material weaknesses and material compliance are the most serious. Material non-compliance has more to do with laws and regulations as opposed to your internal control system. The fact that we're using other debt service funds or custodial funds is basically illegal. It's against processes. Okay, but that's basically the only difference. But in terms of the seriousness of them, if it says material, that's the most serious.
Thank you.
Okay, on page 92, expenditures in excess of budgetary authority. These are line items within these particular funds that had expenditures more than was allowed for in the budget. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that we ran out of cash in the bank. What it means is, in a school district, you have various functions. The most important one is instruction. Okay, then there will be instructional support. There will be general admin. There will be school admin. Each one of those is a function. Okay, according to PED standards, you cannot overexpend a function. Okay, now that doesn't mean that you. Oh, I'm being attacked.
Show them over here.
Yeah. Sorry, George. That does not mean that you have overspent the entire fund. And in the case of particularly the operational account, you will find that the entire fund wasn't overspent, but certain functions were. That is not allowed under the PED regulations. That is different from municipalities and counties, where they only have to worry about it at the entire fund level. Okay? But at school districts, it's got to be by the function. So what we're saying is, even though we may have had the money available, we didn't move the budget around to put it where it needed to be so that we could spend the money and not have fun.
Could you explain what other non-compliance means? Is it because it's the PED's manual versus statute?
Other non-compliance means that it is considered not as significant as the other ones, basically because school districts, it is not uncommon for school districts to overexpend a line item. Okay? This can occur a lot of times because of PED themselves create the problem. Because what they do is, let me use an example, a specific example. Let's use Title I. It's an easy example. It's a big program, a lot of federal money, okay? What the finance director has to do is they have to make a request. They get no advance funds. They have to spend the money and then make a request for reimbursement, okay? Okay, well, when they do the June reimbursement, it's by nature after June 30th, okay? So they make a request for reimbursement and they may be okay within their budget, but then PED says, no, we're not gonna let you spend this in Title I. You gotta put it back in operation. If that happens and the budget's closed, you can get an overrun very quickly, okay? I'm not a big fan of budgeting, of considering overruns by individual functions as much as I am of a total fund. But it's considered other non-compliance because it doesn't meet the criterion to be a material weakness in internal control. You have controls in place, but we didn't make enough adjustments, enough VARs, budget adjustment requests to clear.
And that was going to be my question. The way to avoid that would have been to submit a bar to the board, making the board aware of that shuffle of money.
That is true to some extent, Gilbert, but here's the problem with that. It's a two-edged sword for the public education department because they disallow that expenditure, say move it back into operation. You say, oh, hell, I'm over, excuse my language, but I'm over budget now. I need to make a request for a budget reimbursement. I need to make a BAR, budget adjustment request. PED won't allow you to do it because it may be past the 10th of July. So they won't let you do it, okay? So you come into a catch-22. They're making you throw it into the expenditures, but they won't let you make your budget adjustments. And in this case, particularly in operational, because I checked it, I know that there was significant budget available in other functions, so we could have covered these things. We just haven't. And it is by nature a finding.
Will we have access because this is one of the ones that's repeated for 4 years. And will we have access to take a look at your work papers to see what these transactions were that were funded? Or can you give us a report of what accounts were affected or line items?
I would know that offhand. That would be a request to the finance director because she could tell you what had been disallowed and what budget adjustments could have been made but weren't allowed to be made.
Okay.
Okay. And you did say that it's a commonplace, but it occurs frequently, not in other districts.
It's not an uncommon. So that's the best way to put it. It happens. Now, the whether it happened due to what I said could have happened, I don't know. I didn't follow it up. My job is to find it. Not to follow up on it.
Okay.
All right, 2021-06 on page 93. Purchase of gaming consoles.
The IT staff needs high-level computers. There's no doubt about that. At the time that they purchased these, they believed that they were going to have to use them for a while before their new server. It ended up that the new server beat the consoles, but they didn't know that at the time. However, these are normally high-dollar gaming consoles. They're used by gamers to, they have faster reaction times. They have a lot of stuff. They're also good for the school district. There's nothing wrong with that. However, there were some things that were purchased at an additional cost. Wireless gaming mouses, stereo surround gaming headsets, and the attendant Alienware Vindicator backpacks. Now, there's a backpacks, maybe they were needed, but for the district's purposes, I couldn't figure out how they would need wireless gaming mouses and stereo surround gaming headsets at additional cost. If they had been thrown in as part of the package, you probably wouldn't have this comment, but they were additional costs.
Or maybe if there's some sort of justification within the package on why they're purchasing said equipment that's not standard, right?
Yes. And we asked, and we were told that that basically what's in the agency response. The decision to purchase this type of equipment was made after it was determined that the business platform on the current laptops was insufficient to accomplish streaming needs and support remote learning. The equipment was available as an educational bundle for a reduced cost. That may be true, but we did pay for additional items that really only apply to gaming. Part of our new mandate from the state auditor and from the AICPA, which is people that make my rules, is that you're not looking at just fraud, you're also looking at abuse. Was it a good expenditure of funds, that sort of stuff. Again, it's other non-compliance because maybe they needed this stuff. I couldn't get an adequate explanation to tell them that they did.
Okay, 2021-007. In a test of 100 expenditures and 3 months of credit card transactions, we noted the following. The purchase order was dated after the invoice, 21 instances totaling X number of dollars. 50 instances of late payment were noted, incurring late charges in some instances. 70 instances where the invoice had not been approved for payment prior to disbursement. And gross receipts tax was paid on goods in the amount of $10,000. I should explain that a little bit. As a governmental entity, if you go out and buy a thermos as a governmental entity, you don't pay sales tax on it or gross receipts tax on it. You don't pay the 8% on it, or depending on where you're at. It used to be 8% silver. It's a different number as of July 1st. It was 8%. You don't pay on those. You're exempted. You pay on services, yes, but not on goods. Okay. Now, vendors are always looking to charge tax. Okay? And particularly when you get credit card purchases, it sometimes can be very difficult to get them to take off the tax. Even if you send them non-taxable transaction certificates, even if you notify them, they still have a problem. But that's the reason that this is in here, because you shouldn't be paying tax on goods. Okay? Okay. According to agency response, there was a lapse in the 2020-21 fiscal year where the prior procurement officer resigned and the new one started. During this period, an outside agency was overseeing procurement. Since the current procurement officer has been on staff, reminders have been sent about submitting timely requisitions.
Okay, you ready to go to the next one?
Okay. 2021-008.
The capital improvement funds referred to here are commonly called SB9 funds. Okay. SB9 funds is a specific thing that the state allows you, if you can get it past the voters, you can tack on a 2 mil levy, which means $2 per thousand of valued property for use to maintain and construct new programs or new buildings, new stuff. It can't be used for operations. It can only be used specifically for operation and maintenance plan. And that operation and maintenance plan excludes salaries. Okay, it's meant to be a backup measure for you to help you maintain your facilities.
You said operations and maintenance. Do you mean physical plant and maintenance, or do you mean
Physical plant maintenance is what. Yes. No, not operations. You can't spend it on operations.
Yes,
You can spend it on physical plant and maintenance. So thank you.
And so we found a couple of fuel purchases that
were not legal under those programs. Under the SB 9 program, they should have been charged either food service or operational. And so that's what that was at there.
And the last one is one, guys, we've discussed forever. We have a late audit report, okay?
That was a combination of Terry and me. We're both guilty, okay? Terry for a while, me for a while. But there were the original reasons for it, and the decision that was made is still, in my opinion, correct. You're off the state auditor's list now. I haven't looked, but I'm sure you are. But we have an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which allows us, if we do decide to go out for bonds at some later date, a bond rating agency looks at that all the time. They're not going to look at, were you on the at-risk list for 2 weeks? They're going to look at what your opinion will say. So in the long run, when we sat down with the audit committee, but Joyce and Terry and I sat down, it was a unanimous decision to delay off this report until we could get cash balance. That's all I have. I will take any additional questions you guys have.
Is there any additional questions for Mr. Stone?
Yes. On page 89, summary audit results number 9. Cobre Schools district number 2 is not a low risk auditee. That designation first occurred the year prior to this, but prior to that, in 2019, we were a low risk audit. What is the significance of not being a low risk auditee anymore?
For you guys, nothing. It's in significance for me because it means I have to test more federal programs. A low risk auditee is one who doesn't have any material weaknesses or has filed all their reports, their federal reports, with the federal government on time. If you have a material weakness, or if you haven't filed your, it's called a data collection form, and it's a form that we have to file electronically after the audit is completed with the federal government. It's a combination between us and the district. Okay, we both have to fill out our parts. If you meet these criteria, then you're considered a low risk auditee, and you only have to test 20% of the federal funds expended. I only have to test 20%. If you're not a low risk auditee, I have to test 40%. So the difference being, although I've never really enforced it very much, the difference being is the additional cost for the audit itself. But in terms of whether it doesn't carry the significance other than how you're rated with the federal government in terms of whether you have done everything you're supposed to do on time. Sort of stuff is what
And to be at a level that would be more significant, we'd have to have audit findings in excess or individual audit findings in excess of $750,000.
No. Those are mutually exclusive things.
Okay.
I see where you're coming from, Gilbert, but it's a different situation. If you spend more than $750,000 in federal funds, you have to have what's called in my profession a single audit. That means I have to go out and do specific special federal tests of the programs that I decide I need to test. They're called major programs. If you spend less than $750,000, you don't have to have a single audit at all. Okay. You spend more than $750,000, you have to have a single audit. But that's basically what that means. It's not necessarily related to findings. It's related just to the total expenditures of federal funds.
And if you look on, bear with me a minute, please.
Page 82, you'll see the total expenditures of federal funds for Cobre schools for that year.
It's called the Scheduled Expenditures of Federal Awards. Last year, obviously, your expenditures were way up compared to normal because of COVID-19. But okay, so that means that you guys spent 4.2 million. 40% of that means that I apply specific tests and provisions to, I picked the programs, and the programs that were picked show up on page 89 on number 7, and those will show you the ones that were picked last year to get to the 40% level. Okay. Now the federal government publishes a specific set of guidelines on how you test federal funds. So we had to test 40% of them. And the other thing is the federal government said that all COVID funding is higher risk, so it has to be tested. So that's why you get this. You normally only get 1 or 2, but you got a listing of all these different programs because of that.
That was page 89 or
Page 89, number 7.
Okay.
Under the summary of audit results.
Any more questions from Mr. Stone?
I have a question. Mr. Cordova mentioned that the process for making the audit public was that the board had to approve it and then it would become public. But the state auditor released it on their website 5 days after they received it. Could you clarify on what the procedure is?
The procedure is 5 days after the state auditor accepts your report, it becomes public record. There is also a requirement from the state auditor that I present it to the board, okay? But the presentation to the board, if it's subsequent to 5 days, does not delay it becoming public record. It is public record 5 days after the state auditor releases it. In this instance, he released it on Friday the 16th. Okay, thanks. I don't know, but on the 21st, it became public record and he published it on his website.
Mm-hmm.
At that point in time, it's public record because it's out there available for everybody.
Right.
Yeah. So I think there has been some confusion in the past about, when it became public record, when it didn't. But it becomes public record 5 days after the state auditor releases it, whether there's been any board action.
Thank you. That's how I understood it, and I just wanted to make sure.
Just to correct, it was released by the auditor on June 30th.
June 30th, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know that, and I lied to you because I thought it'd be longer than it was. They got on it right away. So, and I apologize for that. That's the quickest I've ever seen them do. But again, it wasn't their high period for receiving audit reports.
We're the only ones on the
Yeah.
non-compliance.
So I'm sure there's somebody else out there that still hasn't got it in. I'll guarantee you, we can go look and find other people that are still.
We looked at it and Cobre was the only school. There's municipalities, lots of
Oh,
municipalities.
yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, but Cobre was the only school district that was on the list.
But it basically what happened is we sent it on the Friday, I believe, because that's when I notified you guys. And on Tuesday, we had some stuff back, and then boom, it was released right after that. But it was released on the following Thursday, because it got released the following. We sent it in on a Friday, it got released the following Friday. No, it got approved the following Friday, and then the following Thursday it got released, or Wednesday or Thursday. Because there was a discussion here before, and I wasn't clear, because the state auditor's letter releasing the audit report says 5 days. Now, a lot of times that means 5 business days, but in this instance, it did not. It was 5 days.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Stone?
Thank you, Mr. Stone.
Recommendation, sir?
I recommend that we approve the 2020-2021 audit.
You heard the recommendation, entertaining motions? Mr. Guadiana motion, second.
Second.
Mrs. Murillo second. So roll call vote. Myself, yes.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Appreciate your help.
Thank you, Mike.
Next on the agenda is going to be.
On the audit, can I make a comment on the audit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Before we move on, before I forget, I wasn't invited to the audit exit interview, which is required in our board policy. So I'm just hoping that, going forward, that all board members are told about the exit interview. And also in our policy, it talks about, that a study session will be conducted to review the district's annual audit within 30 days of the release. So I just want to make sure that we're following our policy on that. And it's policy 520.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other comments or questions? Moving on to the next agenda item is going to be, we're moving up to the backpack program. How about that, sir? Go right ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dave Chandler. I'm from the Commons Center for Food Security and Sustainability. I do have a PowerPoint. I don't know if we can get it up or not. If we can't, that's fine, because I'm going to be going over some materials that were handed out to you today.
Do we have that PowerPoint, sir?
Almost at it.
Okay.
So many of you know the Commons is our food pantry in Grant County. We have 5 pantries we do, 2 in Silver City, 1 in the mining district, 1 in the Cheetah, and 1 in the Cliff Gila area every month. So we are helping over 600 households each month with food boxes. And since COVID, we've been doing all that curbside. So if you come to the mining district, go out to Fort Bayard on the 3rd Tuesday of the month, you'll see about 100 cars lined up waiting to get their food box. That food arrives at 9 o'clock in the morning. We have a couple hours to get it processed and in boxes back on the curb for the neighbors that we serve. We also do a backpack program in Cobre Consolidated School District. There we go. Yeah, that's it. So if we can scroll through.
Can you go to the next one?
Yeah. It's a title slide. You can go to the next one. It talks about our mission. So the mission at the Commons is to meet the immediate needs of Grant County residents who are food insecure. That's really what we do. We have a big warehouse in Silver City. Food comes in, we process it, we get it out to families. Same thing happens in the mining district, Wichita, and Cliff Gila. We also have demonstration gardens, youth programs, really try to work with the community on nutrition awareness, gardening, anything we can do to elevate the quality of food that's happening for the families that we serve. You go to the next slide. This is a picture of our property in Silver City. Again, we reach over 600 households every year. I have to get close to here from this. 5 pantries each month. You go to the next slide. These are our grounds in Silver City. We have about almost an acre of demonstration gardens. We have school children that come and learn about irrigation and gardening and nutrition. We have a commercial kitchen that incubates a number of small businesses, value-added food products. People that make ice cream and bake bread and other kinds of things can use our kitchen because it has commercial rating and then sell those products in stores. So lots of activity on our campus, but again, the bulk of what we do is getting food to families in need. Go to the next slide, please. Again, we have pretty robust youth program. We have a Youth Leadership Institute. We have a Youth Conservation Corps program over the summer. We really want to work with young people, help them stay connected to their community, learn about nutrition, learn about food, help us with the families that we serve. Next slide, please. So we want to address, hopefully, food insecurity in the Cobre School District. We did receive a grant from United Way. We've done some other fundraising. We would like to identify a pilot school that we start with this year, and that we look at what's happening with the school, from Monday until Thursday, and then how do we supplement what happens when kids go home on Thursday afternoon all the way till Monday. Now that could be a backpack program. Backpack programs, that's food that goes home with that individual child. It used to be in backpacks. It's really just in snack packs now. We don't use backpacks anymore because of the stigma associated with kids, wearing a backpack that is about food insecurity. But there's a lot of nutrition value. It's food that kids want to eat. It belongs to them to take home for the weekend. It's not to feed their family. It's not to prepare a meal. It's food that they can eat and have for themselves. Those programs are very effective under certain circumstances. Other programs like a school pantry, where we actually have food at the school site, and families can come, students can come, or parents or family members can come, choose from the pantry and take stuff home. Having food boxes at the school, having a Thursday distribution, when families drive up to pick up their students, we can put a box in their car, a pre-assembled box. And then also a produce stand. We're finding in a lot of communities having a produce stand there on Thursday where families can come and just pick what they want, free of charge from the produce stand. Really adds to the quality of the food that's going home. Our goal this next school year, with your permission, is to identify a school, do an assessment. I think if we could jump to the next slide here. Do an assessment and determine which of these 4 delivery methods, and it might be a blended approach where we use some kind of combination of all 4 of them, is going to best help those students and families in that school. Every school is different. Every school has different dynamics, different things affecting the families that go to that school. So we would like to be pretty innovative and bold in our approach and try some things, be able to measure what we're doing, and so we know, is this having some kind of impact with the families that we're serving, the students that we're serving. A pilot program in one school offers us a couple of different things. Gives us a chance to build communication pathways between our staff and the school staff, our volunteers, community volunteers that really come from the school and our organization. It allows us to build some trusting relationships as we go along. I want to be able to assess the needs of the school, find out what they are, and then how do we measure those needs. I want to be able to recruit, train, and support community volunteers, backpack programs. All of these programs are heavily reliant on volunteers to do it. We have 3 part-time staff and about 60 volunteers that distribute that 600,000 pounds of food that we distribute every year. So volunteers are really critical. And if you can get the volunteers that, parents and folks connected to your school to help us in the program, that really makes it a stronger program. Want to design and implement distribution systems that are effective. And then we want to have a year to be able to secure some additional funding. We have a great year. We've kind of figured some things out, and we're going to go district-wide. That's going to cost a lot of money. The pilot program, I think I have it on your sheet, is about $18,000 that we've secured for this year. If we went district-wide to all 5 elementary schools, that could be 5 times the amount. Well, we're not going to be able to do that. Not the second year.
The funding you have secured, according to the information we got, was $16,000, and the costs were almost $19,000. So
yeah, we're going to have to try to make up the difference. Part of designing a blended program, those snack packs or backpacks cost about $3 each. So if you have 175 students at Bayard Elementary School and everyone gets something to take home on Thursday, of every Thursday of the school year, that's $3 times 175 times 36. That's where I think we get the 18,000. Correct me on that. But they get up there. So we can reduce the number of students. Might not be that every single student in the school needs to take home food. We can reduce the cost of those snack packs. We can, lessen the amount of food. We can lower the quality. But there's ways to trim costs on the snack packs. If we do a blended approach and families are receiving services, if there's 35 families get a box, boxes cost about $5. So we can feed a family all weekend for $5, but that snack pack costs $3 because those snacks are, they're just more expensive. It's milk, it's cereal, it's granola bars, it's things that cost a little bit more than beans and rice and macaroni and cheese, the typical kinds of things we put in a pantry box.
So our selection for a pilot program for a site would be better served if we can analyze whether it feeds the whole family versus the individual child.
Well, I think, again, every school is going to be a little bit different. I think it doesn't matter where we start. I think we do have conversations going on this week with Bayard Elementary School, the principal there, wanted to hear more about the program. And I said, well, we've already met with Dr. Spalletta, meeting with the school board. We'll get some kind of, information and, maybe a way to proceed from there. But we would like to pick one school, give it a try this year, see how it goes. The main thing is going to be able to mobilize those volunteers, identify the needs of those families, and then design the program to meet those needs.
What's the deadline for us to give a school to you? Because what I would envision is maybe looking at the metrics of the community, because there's some communities that are more impoverished than others, right? There's some communities in greater need than others. So probably looking at that as a board and saying, okay, this elementary school probably would need this more.
Yeah, well,
I venture to say, just me looking at this, I think the snack packs is good if each student can do them, just because you say the stigma of, right? A kid getting the food box and the stigma of a kid getting the food box and taking it home, there is some stigma. So I would move towards the snack pack like you're talking about, but I think we need to. But what's the deadline that we need to get it?
Well, we would like to identify a school and get some discussions going and see what we could design before, school starts or shortly thereafter. To be honest with you, there isn't a school in the Cobre district that doesn't have deep needs compared to other schools in New Mexico. Bayard Elementary, if you look at all the metrics of academic performance, income levels for families that live in that catchment area for the district, it's just off the charts. Low income families, many of them are already participating in our food distribution program in the mining district. We think that's a great place to start, particularly if you have a principal who's into it, because it takes some level of buy-in from school leadership, to allow us to be on campus, to work with volunteers, to, make things happen. So, I'm feeling like Bayard Elementary is probably a pretty good place to start this year. It doesn't have to be. I think either Bayard or Central are your two largest elementary schools. And again, deep needs in both of those communities.
If we have a board meeting in the next 2 weeks and we can discuss it as an agenda item and then bring it to you, would that be plenty of time?
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah, you bet.
I have a question about your produce stand. So at the Commons in Silver, you guys have a little setup there where people can put produce and then people can go pick it up.
Yes.
So I have a garden. I have so much zucchini every year. Do we have something similar in the mining district where I can take my excess produce from my garden and leave it somewhere where people who need it can get it?
We don't yet, but we're trying to replicate, that's called a free farm stand program. We're trying to replicate that in the mining district. We did get a small grant to do that, but there's been, we've got to get the staff to, people on board to make it happen. Our goal is to have our own building in the mining district, our own warehouse where we can do food distribution, where we can have community gatherings, where we can do youth development, we can have a youth conservation corps program, we can have demonstration gardens, we can have a presence in the mining district, and that farm stand might be there. It might be at the library in Bayard. It could be at City Hall in Santa Clara. But when it's working at its best, you're right. Those farm stands, the neighborhood kind of owns it. And when people have extra from their home gardens, they bring it to the farm stand and when people need something, they come to the farm stand and take it. We see that in Silver City, that probably half of what is put on the farm stand comes from neighborhood gardens. And we don't, we arrive up in the morning and the farm stand's full. It was nothing we did. Somebody came and brought zucchini, apples, apricots. We didn't know apricots. So if we can foster the kind of community dynamic where that farm stand can not be vandalized, where the neighbors really can own it and start putting their produce on there, that really could be a great thing. And that could happen at a school site. There's no reason why that farm stand couldn't be in front of, Central or Bayard or any place really.
Can we drop that down as an agenda item for next meeting, sir?
I've done that, and I'll also talk to our admin team to see if they have some ideas too. That was what my original plan was.
So the next, then the discussion section at the next meeting, so make that an action item. My daughter goes to the program there for cooking, and the caloric intake has gone up significantly in our house, but but it tastes very good.
Yeah, we have culinary arts programming, and again, we would love to have our own building in the mining district. We're looking at some options, some existing buildings, or perhaps building on an empty lot. Working with entities that have additional underutilized space in their entity. There's some municipalities that have warehouse space, or some school districts that have warehouse space that might be appropriate.
Have you made that pitch to the city council here in Bayard?
I've talked with the mayor. We've looked at a building that he owns. He's aware that we're interested in being in the mining district. We're working with the Terrazas family. They've got a building near the library, the old lumber yard building, which would be awesome. But there's lots to think about. And then the funding for that. We're the largest pantry in New Mexico that relies 97% on just community donations. We don't get state money, federal money, county money, municipal money. It's all just neighbors saying, we don't want our neighbors to go hungry. Here's $40. So that's why we have 3 part-time staff and about 60 volunteers. And we're pretty, aggressive in fundraising and working with foundations and finding grants. We found the money to do this pilot project, and we think if we can do it right and get things in place and show that we're having some kind of impact, that additional funding will come. In the Silver District, we provide about, in a regular year, not a COVID year, but when it's working regular, the way it should be, we're providing about $30,000 in our funding, and the school district provides $10,000. So that $40,000 gets kind of pooled together, and we do backpacks almost exclusively. Now we're going to look at it this year because there's some question if a blended program wouldn't have a deeper impact than just sending backpacks home. They're expensive. Sometimes we'll call up a school, how's it going? And they say, well, I'm looking under my desk and there's 30 backpacks that were never distributed. So each school has to really kind of get into it, find ways to communicate with us, communicate with their staff to make sure things get going. And so there can be a lot of obstacles along the way. Again, that's why a pilot program, I think, makes sense, because we can iron a lot of those issues out and then kind of ramp up and go district-wide that next year.
Well, hopefully we can help you with that, sir.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. We want to be here in the mining district. We want to have our own place. We want to, lean on the wonderful resources of the folks who live here, the school district municipalities. The Village of Santa Clara has been really gracious. They allow us to use the building out of Fort Bayard. The county's been great. You guys have been great. Hurley and Bayard both have been great. So we think there's a way to make it happen. We'd like to help with that.
Any more comments or questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you for sticking with us.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. It's not an easy thing, right? The leadership can be difficult. So I appreciate what you guys are doing and hanging in there. It's tough.
And we should hopefully have a decision by next board meeting of which school would be able to participate.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you bet. I'm gonna try to get my junk back.
Thank Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, thanks, everybody.
So, next on the, action items is approval of June 27th board meeting minutes. I did see something that, I don't know which one, there was two pieces of paper, and it's under 2M. One of them has motion carried 3-0, one of them has 3-1, so I'm assuming 3-1 is the correct minutes, is that right?
There's also 3-0 and that one is circle election.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the 3-1 is the correct.
I'm not sure. I don't remember voting no. I may have abstained, but I don't think I voted no.
Which one was it?
Um,
M, approval of
2M, approval of vehicle disposition.
disposition list?
yeah, I don't think I would have voted against this position.
Let me see if I have notes on it. I know I took notes, but I don't know where they're at.
Other than that, is there anything else in the minutes that anybody sees that needs to be changed or is different?
Would like me to change that one then?
It's changed, it is changed already, sir. There's two of, I got two of them. I got motion carried, it's the same sheet, but it's just different.
I would suggest that if I may, that we take a look at what happened in the YouTube and let it reflect what happened there. 'Cause I don't-
So do we want to table this until next meeting then, approve these minutes?
I have that you voted no in my notes.
Okay,
That's fine.
Is it okay then?
recommendations, sir, yeah.
It have to be 3-1 instead of 3-0.
Yeah,
It's it is listed as 3-1 on here. The new one that I got is listed as 3-1.
So I make a motion that we approve the June 27, 2022 board meeting minutes.
Here's the recommendation, entertain motions. Mr. Guadiana moves, second.
Second,
Ms. Murillo seconds, so roll call vote, yes for myself,
yes.
3-0. Next action item is going to be approval of the student athlete handbook.
Thank you. Board members, for your time. So this is the other part of the athletic handbook that, portion that we give to our students. The adjustments that were suggested for the, adult handbook are the same, very identical. And we just, added them to the, student handbook. So the things that were new in the handbook are the same. I don't know if you wanted me to go over those things with you again, or just approve them as we did last week.
Do you mind going over them briefly? Because like I said, I wasn't here. I've been here for a couple of weeks.
So,
Just real brief, I mean.
what we added on page 5 was, students that will be placed on the academic probation. We changed one word from will to can. That's at the bottom on 2. And that just went from, like I said, will be or can be limited to. So it went from will to can on that one. Okay, on page 7, we talk about attendance. Students who fall under 90% attendance in any class period will be placed on academic probation. You will not be allowed to travel or be dismissed early from any classes to attend any activity or sporting events. Attendance will be pulled at progress report, and at the end of every grading period, excused absences will be calculated. Policy will be enforced regardless of academic standing. And that's to combat the students that are missing 40, 50 days in one period and still are eligible. Number 6 on the same page, any student who is placed on alternative setting is no longer eligible to participate in athletic activities as long as they remain in the alternative setting. These students are no longer following the 4.0 grading scale and have lost the privilege to represent Cobre in any extracurricular activities. Okay. Then we move on to page 22. And then this was the wording corrections that we had talked about with Mr. Guadiana. And so it now reads, any student that wishes to participate in more than one sport or activity must have a written consent form from the athletic director and must have a meeting with the coaches, athletic director, and parents prior to participation
the concurrence votes. So that was reading a little bit weird, so that's the new word.
So still the student is responsible for having that meeting?
Well, the students are, is that how it reads? Is that how it sounds?
That's
Let's see. Any student that wishes to participate in more than one sport must have written consent from the athletic director and must have a meeting with the coaches, athletic director, and parents prior to participation in any meeting.
That still infers the student has to set up that meeting as opposed to.
Well, I think, I don't know that it does. I don't know. Do you guys think that this is the student's responsibility at that point?
The way I read it, it seems like it's not advising, it's not just saying the student has to set it up. It sounds like it's a cooperative type deal.
I think we have a different word.
Yeah, you have the old wording in that one.
I
That
mean,
was-
a high school athlete, if they want to play both sports, I think they can take initiative.
And I would
to go
assume
talk to
exactly
you.
that, the same,
Yeah.
that if they're wanting to do both sports, then yeah, they would. I don't have any issues with the wording on the current one.
And then, that kind of continues a little bit. That was the word that one suggested that we adjust a little bit, and I think they did. I don't know, it sounds like it's okay. Although students may have a choice in determining practices, no out-of-season practice can take precedence in-season practice for the more district games take precedence. Regular season games and state tournaments and competitions take precedence over district or regular season games. If any conflict should occur, if such conflict occurs that coaches, students, and parents cannot come to an agreement, the athletic director will make the final determination. And those were the only adjustments to the student handbook.
You had removed,
Oh, yeah, on page, yes. It's back in.
Okay.
Yes, I forgot about that. So there was a strike through that we, on page 4. This is the final draft, so it's not there anymore, so I didn't catch it. But yes, on page 4, number 6, head coaches, sponsors, and responsible. That was a strike through that I had suggested take out. We decided to put it back in, so it stays as is.
So it shouldn't be a strike, it's gonna stay.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Any questions or concerns?
I recommend that we approve the 2022 Student Athlete Handbook.
You heard the recommendation, do I have any motions? Mr. Guardiana moves, any seconds?
Second.
Ms. Murillo seconds, roll call vote, myself, aye.
Yes.
Motion carries. Next, agenda item is gonna be approval of bills.
The committee chair normally does that, and this is not here.
How do you recommend we proceed, sir?
I mean, I could see if I have any. I was at the meeting. I can do it.
You like the finance review?
Yes. I can get the minutes. That's another binder. Okay, so we had a finance meeting June 8th, and Dr. Splatted, Mrs. Hoping, Mr. Esqueda, myself were present, and Toy was on the phone for a part of the meeting. So we did review the bills. Oh, did I say June? Oh, it says June on the, it says June on the thing, okay. Yeah. I didn't even catch myself, yeah. So we did go over the summary of bills, review of bills. We went over some bids, we went over staffing, finance summary. We covered transportation budget and contract salary schedules, which is still a work in progress, SB 9 budget. And I think that's a lot that we covered. I do have a question though, in light of our internal, in light of our audit. I had a question on one line item that I thought was pretty expensive for the items that were purchased. Do you remember which one I was talking about? The $150 DVDs?
Yes, that was for the library.
Yeah, and so, you know, in the audit, it talked about how the gaming systems could be considered not ordinary and necessary for operations. And so I'm just curious as to how it's being checked for when teachers or librarians use their Go Bonds money or teachers buy things for their classroom. How is this? Because I remember when I was here, I think when I did a requisition, we had to sign that we got the best deal, something like that.
Right. It's called the public purpose statement on the requisition that says, and what the criteria that we have to use for that is reasonable, necessary, allocable, which means if it's grant funded, that it's allocated to that, from the budget to that particular purchase, and allowable. So the two, allocable and allowable, under the grant program specifically state that, you know, you have to look at the grant program and it has to tie with the public purpose that says this is part of the grant, you know, the grant funding, and this is what we intend to spend it on. As far as reasonable and necessary, that is also included as part of their statement that says, you know, this is, you know, for this purpose. And as far as to your DVDs for Go Bond, that was Go Bond Libraries, and that is a specific fund given by the state to, it goes through the voters and it goes through the process through capital outlay. So they request a request to obligate funds. So what we have to do is submit their cards or submit their estimates or orders to the state prior to them even requisitioning or obtaining a PO for that. If the state allows the purchase through those grant funds, then we're okay to allow them to be purchased.
Okay, so the state looks at,
They're specific.
look at them and then they say that's okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Like for instance, on Follett, like a lot of them order from Follett Library. One of the things that is not allowable under Go Bond is class sets. So they can't buy sets of books for, you know, under the Go Bond program for the library. It has to be one or two titles max that can be checked out for the library, but it can't be a whole set to put in the classroom to be used in their curriculum. It has to be libraries for checkout. So that's one instance.
Could the librarian buy a class set and keep it in their library and the teachers can check it out?
No. It's one of the very specific items under the Go Bond libraries. And it has to be library books and it cannot be sets for classes, you know, and that's why they limit them to, I think it's 2 or 3 titles of one of the same title for that library. So they can't even buy like duplicate of the same books. But
Basically, that would result in supplanting the operation budget if the money comes from the library.
no.
If it goes in a classroom, that's part of the operating budget.
If it goes for instruction, yes,
Yeah,
correct.
that's.
It wouldn't be supplanting because it would be a supplanting, yeah.
It would be
They could-
supplanting.
Thank you.
I'm just going through real quick, so.
Sure.
And what is that one?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Scala, since you were at the meeting, and others were, You could, if you need to elaborate, well, please do me a favor, keep your remarks brief, because we do have business of the board to attend to.
No, I mean, as Serena mentioned, I was present and, in light of reviewing the audit prior to the meeting, I had a significant amount of questions. They were addressed appropriately, and I had no concerns or issues as a result of that in regards to the bills that you have before you. Did I get to know? Thanks, sir. You got it.
These bills include May 26th through June 30th. There's 2 sets of bills in there.
If we have questions of any of the new expenses, we can still get answers to that. Okay. Rather than trying to.
And if I may encourage my statement, as a result of that, my comment was only to the bills that were presented to us on Friday for review.
Are they these bills right here then?
I don't have the full listing.
May 26th.
Yes, we did not any expenditures after.
You got the one that goes all the way through June 17th
Over to June 30th.
or June 30th?
Anybody have any comments or questions in regards to the list of bills?
In my packet, it says May 26th through June 16th.
There's a second
There's a
packet
second
after
one.
that, June
Oh,
17th to June 30th.
Is the May 26th the one from prior?
Yes.
Okay. May 26th.
So did you guys look at the other one?
We looked at June 17th through June 30th. And in a previous board meeting,
You
we
looked
had
at the other
looked at
So you have both moved. Nothing else. There's nothing in there that kind of jumps out at me. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we go for recommendation? Dr. Splay?
I recommend that we approve the bills from May 26th through June 30th, 2022.
There's a recommendation, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Murillo moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Guadiana. Roll call vote. Myself, yes.
Yes.
Motion carries. Moves us to our next agenda item, which is going to be approval of the 2022-23 substitute handbook.
Good evening, everyone. So we presented this on our last meeting, and there was just a couple of changes that we did. And I should have it, so give me a second to close those changes. So the first one that you need to go to is page 6. Our allowance subsidy salary schedule, okay? So the very top, the substitute teacher pay is based on classifications and 3 classifications at the top. And we went ahead and we looked at that. And so for the class 1 substitute, it'll be at $16.25, which would be $114.60 a day. Class 2 at $17.79 an hour for $135.91 a day. And class 3 substitute will hold the current municipal teaching license, will be paid at $18.57 an hour at $141.87. If they're subbing for it'll be substituting for certified teachers that do instructional aid, it will be at a rate of $15 if they're subbing for instructional aid. That one's not be like that. Look at. And then the other one that was asked to be looked at was the one on, oh, right above it, or on page 5, sorry, I skipped that. at the very top, we had some physical demands, and so we just said that we would follow any regulations for any VA regulations on that.
I think that's a lot to, I had a question, if the long-term, substitute is contractors for 154 days, is that paid whether or not they work them, or?
Yes.
Yes, they don't work good and they don't get.
Good.
Yeah, so.
Wait a minute, say that again?
If they're gonna show up every day and they're gonna get paid.
Okay. Okay, and if they don't work, they don't get paid?
Say that to me one more time, so
I understand what he's saying.
Okay.
I understand what he's asking about the permanent position. So they're gonna be assigned to a school. If
okay.
there's not a need, they're still gonna work that day. They're gonna find something for them to do that day.
Okay, that's good.
Yes.
I like that.
Now, if they work 90 consecutive days, then they have to, that's gonna change their, salary based on the retire, or they work 90 consecutive days in one classroom for the same teacher, that's gonna change some things a little bit for the benefits.
Hopefully, yeah.
But I think that one of the things, like Mr. Guadiana, where you asking, like, if they're sick and they don't show up, do they get paid?
But they're on the schedule for that many number of days.
No, they're not gonna get paid if they're sick.
No, but they're on schedule for
They're
that.
on the schedule for all those days. If they're here, they will receive, payment, yes.
Okay, the other question I had was, there's a part where that can be changed, there's a sentence that there can be changes made to that, to these, provisions without notification.
What are you looking at?
On the policy, that's what, let me see if I can find it.
Page 6,
What's that?
on page 6, where it says reserves the right to change
Yes,
these rates without
yes.
notice.
Why is that? It's on the part where it says, the substitute salary schedule, it's the last sentence.
That's the same thing. If you look at all our salary schedules, they have that on there, that we might have to make changes if we need to. We've never had to. It's just a statement that we have, but we can change the wording if we need to.
I would just like to say with notification.
With the location.
Yeah.
I can do that. I can make that one.
Okay. And it doesn't mean negotiation, it just says with notification.
And when a long-term sub is in the classroom in place of a highly qualified teacher, are the parents notified that their children are being taught by someone who is?
We're going to say a long-term sub or a certified teacher as a sub.
Not necessarily that we have a certified teacher that comes into sub. Not always, that's not always the case. Sometimes it is just a long-term sub that comes in and we do have to notify parents.
The letter says that the teacher does not meet the requirements for being highly qualified.
Okay, so, but in the cases where it does, we do have like the third class, which is, I guess, the permanent, it has that it requires a current teacher, teaching license.
For subs, it's because some of our retired teachers have a license and they can sub.
No, I understand that, but, if, I think your question
Well,
is,
highly qualified, you can have a teaching license and not be highly qualified for what you're studying for.
Correct.
And that applies to all teachers, right? Even if they're hired and they're going through the alternative licensure program, parents, they don't have to be
I mean,
notified?
if they're going through alternative licensure program, they actually get a license, then you don't send the letter home. They actually have a real teaching license.
But are they considered highly qualified?
During that time there.
Because I know, like, when I taught at SNEL, I had to take that language arts test in February to be highly qualified. So I wasn't considered highly qualified until I took that language arts test.
Yes, but our alternative people get everything they need.
So alternative, they're considered highly
They
qualified.
have to have 2 years to comply with what they need to. So they get kind of like, per se license with everything they need to be able to be in there and completed within 2 years.
So parents aren't notified at all that their students are being taught by,
No.
I don't want to say like lower qualified, but
They have
you
they
know.
have the credentials that Ted gave them
Yeah.
because they are in the program that is gonna help them to be.
become highly qualified.
These days, a lot of people take an alternative route, it's pretty popular.
Right.
Especially in Mexico.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Any more questions or comments from Mrs. Davis?
I recommend that we approve the revised 2022, 2023 substitute handbook.
You heard the recommendation. Are there any motions?
So moved.
Ms. Movia moves. Second? Second. Mr. Guardiana seconds. Roll call vote. Myself, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Moving on to approval of transportation budget and contract.
I did want to mention that this is a little bit of a misspelling on this one. Budget considered, it should include enabling the contracts as well. There's, contracts are part of the transportation budget, which wasn't written that way.
Okay. So. A little bit of background. Like I said, I'm assuming this is just the regular stuff that comes through, right? It's just what
So this is the transportation
Oh, okay,
budget, and
gotcha.
it's the contracts for the transportation budget.
And we did go over this in finance, except on page 2, that year was supposed to be changed. Not on my copy. 2021. No, it's a different one. So there's 2 contracts. One is for Montoya and the other one is for Porter. But on the second page of Montoya, it should say September 2022.
What page is that?
Page 2 of the Montoya.
Oh, right here. This one where it says September 2021. So that should be September 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other than the 2022? Is there any questions or comments? None. So the recommendation, sir, I don't know, we have to get that changed and stuff like that.
So I recommend that you approve the 2022, 2023 transportation budget, including all contracts associated with that budget.
Go ahead, no, go ahead, sir.
I have a question. So the president's signature that's gonna be on here, and then it requires a secretary's signature as well.
Do you want to do secretary? Serena?
Well, that's something that we'd have to vote on it, so we can't do that today.
I put that on.
I'm just asking so I can make a nomination. Oh, we can't take an action.
We can't take action on it. It's not on the agenda.
Okay.
So we'd have to wait until the next board meeting. Can it wait to get signed until then, Terry? Or does it have to go right immediately?
The transportation, bureau would like to have it before, make sure that we have it before, that they start running in August. So if I can contact PED and just let them know that there is no secretary at this point. If we can get the president's signature, today, if it gets voted in, then, we would ask that, we could send it in and see.
If you could, just let them know about our situation.
Okay.
And then,
And then also, Mr. Molina, I'll go ahead and reprint that page with the correct
Okay.
date so that before the meeting's over, we can get that signed.
please do so. Yes, ma'am. You heard the recommendation. Do you have a motion? I'm sorry about that. Mr. Guadiana, motion second?
Second.
Ms. Murillo seconds. Roll call vote. Myself, yes.
Yes.
Motion carries. And I'll just hold off on signing these here until.
Okay. I'll just reprint out one page of that correction.
Thank you, ma'am. That moves us to, and Mr. Spalletta, you could definitely, or Dr. Spalletta, you can explain this because there was some confusion on it. Next action item is consideration of censorship terms and conditions currently in place of Board Member Guardiana.
So after talking to our attorney, she said that as a board that you need to review, well, it's supposed to be at the end of the school year, June 30th, the terms of the censorship and determine whether it should be extended or not. So I gave you that information in your packet, the resolution.
Oh, okay, but but no new information.
No new information, no.
I did have questions, but I don't think that people who can answer those questions are, since we're new. I was just wondering why, I'll just state my question, when the, investigation was completed in July, why it's July 1st, why it took, 5 months to get a resolution done. That was a question I had, but.
Another question was why it was allowed to extend beyond the term that I was in. The sanctions cannot extend to new terms if there's a new election and going forward. But nevertheless, do you have a recommendation?
I believe that
Or you have it? Okay.
what's that?
I'm sorry, you have a comment or a recommendation?
No. First of all, I am the president, Mr. Guardiana, so if you could please. See
No, but the recommendations generally come from the superintendent.
Understood. I would like to, like I said, I'm not too familiar with this. I know we discussed some stuff in closed session. Prior to moving to this, and this is just a comment, and we can definitely do recommendation motion afterwards, but if we could involve our council in this, because I believe our council was involved in this the last time we discussed it in closed session. Am I correct in that or no?
I don't think since you guys have been here,
I do remember a conversation.
She recommended that you discuss it tonight and that we have an action item next meeting.
If so, I think that would be best, because one, in light of some of the players involved in this are not here anymore, for one. And so, I'm somewhat confused on what the attorney wanted us to do with this.
It's in, from what I gather, the censorship terms and conditions were that Guardiana couldn't be an officer of the board,
Yes,
and he couldn't be on the committees. And I think we're just going to be reviewing if we still want those, and the other restrictions in place. And
so reviewing or approving?
Reviewing tonight.
Okay,
Approving or making
action.
decisions next week.
All right,
And I'm not
that's where I was confused, sir.
it is an action
She
item.
asked me to put it as an action item.
so an action item.
So, will Mr. Molina be receiving, other than the resolution, the other paperwork regarding the censure? I received it from a former board member.
I have zero background on this because I was not a board member when this happened.
So what I can do is request that from the attorney.
Yes.
And my copies are all redacted. There's no names on, the copies I was given.
So that's all I'm saying is I don't have any visibility on this because I was not a board member. And so it'd be remiss for us to move forward with this, like myself, a majority of the board was not present when this happened. So
I'll get that information and we'll put it as an action item for the next meeting.
okay,
I'd like to make a comment on that. One is that at this time, the censure is no longer in place. The censure it expired on June 30th. And any part of any continuation would be, has to be substantiated in terms of acts that have been identified. So the attorney, absent having, I find this funny that the attorney hasn't provided any basis to make a decision one way or the other. And going back and taking a look at why it happened, it could be well relevant, but for it to go forward in terms of continuing the sanctions, that has to be based on new activity that would justify that.
Actually, it says that it should have been reviewed at the end of the school year.
Yes.
So that was in May.
So
We are behind on doing that.
So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Be remiss, I mean, I would prefer that we do this and talk to our attorneys because they were involved in the process.
But getting back to the point that she just made, the resolution called for the review prior to the end of the year.
And I understand that, Mr. Guadiana, but I was not the president then. I didn't set the agenda. I didn't set the action items. I'm the president now, unfortunately. So that's all I'm asking is that we do our due diligence. It'll be 2 weeks. We can talk to the attorneys and we can approach it then. But I was not, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I was not the president then. It was not my deal to go ahead and put that down as an action item at that time. So all I'm asking is for the 2 weeks so we can discuss that with our council and then we can discuss it next board meeting.
So I move to table this item until the next board meeting.
You heard the motion? Do I have a second? No second?
You can second. The president can second.
That's right, it is in the policy. Okay, I second the motion. Roll call vote, myself, yes.
Yes.
No.
Motion carries. It'll be tabled until the next meeting, until we can talk to council and then decide how we go forward. So that brings us to unfinished business. Central Gym Project, I believe that's you, Mrs.
I'm gonna see you.
No worries.
So I have been in contact with Brock Price, the architect on the project. They're currently in the process of creating the schematic design. We should receive that before the end of the week. And then from there, it moves to the design development and then the construction documents. And then we'll continue to move further from there as I presented in the last meeting. So we are moving forward. They had to redo the designs because it is a different gym, different size, all of that changed. So that's why we're getting a new schematic design.
From my understanding, it's smaller, right? That's what I heard due to cost.
Basically, like half of what a normal elementary gym would be. There is a gym like it, that size in Orford, so we did go to take a trip to RV Trailer to see if we thought it would meet our needs. We believe that it does. Myself, Antonio, and Victor went out there. We had invited a couple of board members who were not able to attend. We also went back to Central Elementary to look at the size of their cafeteria, their multi-purpose room, which is used for the gym right now. So the design that they're doing now for the new gym would be about, what was it, 10 feet, I believe, smaller than what the room is that they're using right now. And the gym would also continue to have a utility room, bathroom, and storage.
Is there any way that that maybe we can get an update each board meeting? I know this is kind of it's a hot button subject with the voters and with.
I'm hoping that maybe even at the next meeting, we can get Rob to come and maybe he can, give a little bit of a presentation on the update. I didn't have time to notify him today, that's why I didn't ask him to come today, because I didn't have the last week. So I just spoke with him today. I did get from Jackie Riley today, the company that did the civil engineering and civil engineering survey and the geotech. So I'm going to be contacting them tomorrow to see where we are with it.
Okay, that'd be great if you can get them over there. That way you can at least give us an update. And I would prefer it to be each board meeting, like I said, it's, or at least every other board meeting, because it is money that we have to, that the voters agreed on, and it's time consuming, and it is a hot button issue, so we can do it at least every other meeting.
Meeting, I believe we had presented 90 days before the start date, so we're looking at an October 1st start date, is the goal for that, so I will definitely.
And remind me, it has to be completed by December 31st, has to be started by December 31st.
No, so what happened was we got a extension, what is it, an extension letter? So we got that approved, the board approved that last time. So what the goal is to spend 85% of the entire 3.5 million by December 1st. So even like if we have materials and stuff that has been ordered, we have 1.1 left, so we're almost to the 85% already. So that's the goal, and if we see that we're not gonna be completed, because we have a completion date right now of June 2023, but if we see that we're not meeting those incremental timelines, all we have to do is make sure that we're contacting the law firm who's helping us with this, which is McCall Partners and someone. We just need to keep them in the loop as to where we are in the process.
And I just want to thank you, Mrs. Varela. I know that this is new, you know, these responsibilities were placed on you, and so I appreciate what you're doing for us.
It's about 3 weeks of work. She's done a great job.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other comments or questions for Mrs. Varela in regards to that, the chip project? Thank you, Ms. Varela. Moving on to policy readings. I'm assuming that's.
Actually,
I
I was asked to put that on the agenda. We're still working on the hundreds. I think we have about 24 remaining. We can approve them all at once, or we can approve them in batches. So that's something I did find out today. I had a hard time getting a hold of Mr. Kennedy with policy services. I just spoke to a few other people at the School Board Association.
So how does that comply with the first reading and second reading?
Well, I've heard different things about that too, but there needs to be a first reading for the public and then a second reading for the public.
But then we can release the 100s.
Yes.
And then.
If that's what you'd like to do, we can do it with the whole, all of them at once or in batches. Or, and I found out we can also do it with an emergency basis with less than 2 readings. So if we want to do a special policy, we can do just 1 reading.
Just a comment here. I think I agree with Ms. Murillo in regards to batches. Because if not, I was part of this before I left, and it's very time consuming. Because if that's the case, we're not even going to get to this until next year. So if we can release them in batches, and then secondly, I would recommend at least we do the 2 readings and kind of leave the emergency thing if it's something exigent versus just doing it. I think the public needs to at least provide some sort of comment and give them that vehicle to do that. So
I just wanted to make a statement. We kind of changed the way we've been doing them. It's worked better, where everybody gets a task of reading so many of the policies and already coming in with their suggestions. And then we went through
We went through about 9
of them very quickly. And it was easier to do than trying to with all that much.
she just assigned us a block, and then we go.
We said this policy, and this policy, 6 or 7 of them, look at them, come back, and meet, say, this is what I think, this is what I think, and then we hash it out, and then we read it, and it went very fast.
When's the next workshop?
We don't have any scheduled, but I'll send out an invitation to everyone.
But I think I'm still not clear on what constitutes the first reading. Is it something that we actually go through and physically read the policy? That's what I understand it to be.
I believe it's in an open forum, right? We read the policy in an open forum.
Yes.
And we allow the public comment. And the public comment, I believe it's not so much public comment and there's somebody here, but they can provide public comment like email or something like that. I think that's what we discussed, right?
That's
That's why I wanted to get some clarification, so that's why I called and emailed Mr. Kennedy that I haven't been able to get a hold of him.
And the challenge is that if we're gonna do a batch, that's a lot of reading. Unless you're talking about doing maybe like 4 or 5 policies at one time. I don't know what you mean by batch.
By the series. So we're talking about, we're done with the 100 series and they do 100 series. We've done the 200 series.
So somebody's gonna read the 100 series policies.
I don't think it's so much reading, it's, we're providing it to the public to view. I don't think so much somebody's dictating every single word in this.
In my experience, it has been you read the policy.
You read the entire policy and dictate it. Maybe if we can get some clarification from Mr. Kennedy, because that would be.
Mr. Kennedy has made his point pretty clear that he believes it's. Right now, he believes we've already done part 1, the first reading.
I know Dr. Coletta reached out to him and he takes a little bit of time to respond. So we can wait for his response and have that concise.
That would be great. I mean, this policy is gonna affect the district for years to come, so we gotta make sure we do it right. But I will say that, I mean, I would not want to sit there and dictate policy. I mean, I guess we need to see what the recommendation is from Dr. Kennedy in regards to that.
I would hate to have to do that. However, I would hate to deprive the public of that requirement.
So,
I'll get some clarification.
a first hearing on it couldn't be like it's published on our website or the first reading. So it doesn't qualify that we post it to a public place and people read it on their own.
That was my understanding of how, I mean, that was my understanding, that it's made public, right? And it's basically the first notice.
So again, I've stated that Dr. Coletta reached out to Mr. Kennedy, who can get us that information, or we can hash it out all night.
Okay, yeah.
Hopefully.
So if we can wait for that response and have to do something already.
So we can get some clarification in regards to what constitutes a reading.
I've been working on it. I apologize. I didn't have it all tonight. But I'll have it for you next time. Or I'll email you actually. I'll let you know.
Any other comments or questions in regard to policy readings? Next item of unfinished business is prior superintendent's leave days. And I apologize, I don't have any visibility on this stuff. So
we've discussed this in the past. I've checked with our attorney. This has to be something that's done in public. Can't be a closed session. Dee does leave days, and she's here to answer any questions you might have. In your packet, you have the same thing you had from last time, Mr. Mendoza's leave plan detail.
I have a question. Yes, I have a question. Who approves the superintendent's leave?
As far as the policy goes, it should be the board.
Okay, and how many approvals did you ever receive from the board?
None.
So how is it determined and also the 4-day week was not in his contract, and it was not in place when you first started, and there was nothing ever in the contract that reflected the change to a 4-day week. In the guise of requiring the 40 hours per week, there was only 32 hours per week being taken. Was there any use of leave that would make up the difference to the 40 hours?
Not that I was told.
And were you involved in the calculating of the amount of leave used?
In the calculation of the amount of
Yes.
leave used?
Yes.
No, the only thing I do is receive the forms or, like in cases with the schools themselves, I get a substitute attendance list from the secretaries, and they put down dates, the people that were gone, substitutes if needed, and then I enter that information into the system.
And so there was nothing similar to that for superintendent?
No, not that I remember getting.
So the questions.
I have a couple questions. So the board is supposed to approve the superintendent or the board president? Do you know what?
I'm not clear on it. I don't remember exactly how it said. I want to say that it stated it in his contract that the board would approve fees. I want to say that that's where I saw it, but I know it's somewhere in policy. I cannot tell you where exactly.
Okay, and so our previous superintendent did not have to, like when I was a teacher, I'd have to fill out the form and get it approved by my principal, and then I'm assuming eventually it got to you. He didn't have to fill out those types of forms.
I don't know what the board instructed him to do at that time. I don't know if he told me he needed to do forms or if he didn't.
So you never received them, so, okay.
So I want, like I said, I'm wondering what are we trying to accomplish here with this?
What we're trying to accomplish is to determine if that was a gift of public funds. If it was, that he was taking time off and not being recorded, then he shouldn't have been paid that. And it's our responsibility to make sure that that accountability exists. Absent that, we paid basically 100% of what the maximum amount of unused leave and unused sick leave for him. So he got $93,000.
I understand. So what I'm saying is, what do we intend to do if that's the case? What is, if that's the case, what's the next step? That's what I'm trying to identify. Is because we have a lot of business. So is it just to air dirty laundry that we as a district did, or is it to so then what is the next step after this? If say we do determine that.
I would hope we try to recover that money from the person that received it, from Mr. Mendoza. If it was if he participated in a process that did not account for his leave, he should be liable for it financially.
Even though we as the board might have failed to account for his leave.
Absolutely. If it was that he never submitted any requests for leave, that's not the board's failure.
Well, I think that we need to regrow our policies and figure out who is the approving authority for the superintendent to take leave. That's where we need to start. That's step number one. And if there is no policy written in place as to who approves leave, then we're still at step number one.
I disagree with that in the sense of it is our policy to make sure, our biggest priority, to make sure that the money spent is spent on what it's intended for. If it was that there was a lack of following policy or oversight, and the superintendent may have been involved in that lack of oversight, then it should be recoverable. At least we should have legal opinion as to whether it's recoverable or not.
That's what I'm getting at, is the legal opinion, not just going forth and going by ourselves. I mean, we have to make sure that we are in the right as a board, policy wise.
So this is a discovery effort, just like what we were talking about in terms of forensic auditing. This is that part of a discovery effort, so that if we see that there seems to be a problem, maybe it can be a forensic audit, or maybe we have enough information, or maybe we decide we don't have enough information and we just let it drop. All those things are possible outcomes.
I would venture to say this is that, and like you said, I think we do need to do our due diligence. If we go upon this endeavor, right? I mean, it's going to involve substantial litigation, and which is going to involve substantial amount of money that the district is going to have to pay out regarding this. So I think we just need to make sure and we need to identify that's very probable. And the fact that if we don't have if we don't even know what our policies are in regards to approving leave, and we take this to litigation, I venture to say we probably wouldn't have a very good case.
Mr. President, would you like me to talk to our attorney about this?
If you could, please, that'd be great.
I would take exception to that. Our attorney has not been forthright in guiding us in these matters. And I would, if anything, I would ask that we get a different attorney's opinion on this. And the other part is that these are standards that are applied throughout the school system. the superintendent has no oversight other than that of the board, whether it's the president or not. But that's pretty uniform and that's pretty well understood. But nevertheless, I would, as far as getting a legal opinion at this point, it would be getting it even before we know there's been something done that's wrong. And so I think the hierarchy, I mean, the order of process should be, let's take a look, see if there's a problem. If there's a problem, let's seek a legal opinion with a better picture of what that problem looks like.
So who do you recommend take a look?
Huh?
Who do you recommend take a look?
We use, what's that other firm we use?
Either way, we're seeking legal counsel.
Yeah.
Either way,
Yeah.
either way, we're seeking legal counsel.
That can happen, but yeah, I would like that we have some idea of the degree to which and what happened, that we could present that to legal counsel. Rather than just go from it right now, just off the cuff. Hey, you know, we don't know whether there's anything wrong or we don't know how much. We know we paid $93,000. And we didn't have the documentation necessary to support that. It could be an internal problem. It could be something that the superintendent was complicit in, and therefore maybe recoverable. We need to get there first, I think, before we ask for a legal opinion.
Well, I venture to say myself and Mrs. McGee were not on the board at that time when all this occurred.
What's that?
We were not on the board when all this happened. You were on the board when this happened.
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm wondering how we need to proceed forward with what we're doing. And I think the first thing we need to do is seek counsel.
I can do some research and I'll get back to you.
I have one more question. So I'm looking at the first page in my packet and it said, you know, he used annual leave on 8/13 of 2013, but it wasn't granted until April 22nd of 2014. Can you explain that? Like, why did it take so long? I know, because I know when I would submit a request for time off, it had to be, you know, approved before I took it or pretty soon after. I mean,
But
well,
one possibility could have been that I didn't get the information until then. And I guess the other thing where you're asking about what the granted date was and how you got to turn in paperwork, the system defaults to the day that I'm entering. So if I enter on the day, I don't enter the date that was granted to you on the form itself. I enter them in a batch and just do the date that I'm entering, if that's what it populates.
so if he wasn't submitting like paperwork for his days off, how were you aware that he had taken days?
Because secretary used to tell me about days that he had taken.
So word of mouth.
That's what I'm getting at. I venture to say this is a processes issue.
More than that, because number one, systematically, people were working 40 hours a week.
I completely understand that. The issue of accountability and who they're reporting to, that's a processes issue that either is written into policy or it's not written into policy, or it's policy we did not follow.
And in that sense, if it is that your contract requires you to work 40 hours a week, and then later on the school district changes, but nothing's reflected on the contract, nothing ever changed. Right now, staff are having to work 40 hours a week for the first time in quite some time. And I appreciate Dr. Spoletta's initiative in that sense. But for that not to happen means that it wasn't being done correctly. And if systematically 1 day a week, Mr. Mendoza wasn't here, that should count as leave. That's to fulfill the 32 to be 40 hours a week. And I don't think that is a process issue. That's pretty much an environment that he created. and should be held liable.
Dr. Flynn, if you do seek counsel, get a recommendation how we proceed forward, that'd be great. So I think kind of right now, we're in the dark on how we're going to proceed forward in regards to this. I'll do that. Thank you, sir. Is there any more questions on that unfinished business?
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man. Okay, moving on to public input on agenda items. Mr. Scott?
Yes, Dr. Scaletta, board members, newly appointed President Molina. In light of what transpired earlier today, I guess I have a question in regards to filling the two vacant positions. I understand that the district has, I believe, 45 days from the date of resignation to fill the two positions. With that, I'd like to respectfully request if the district could look into if only residents within the Cobre district are allowed to fulfill the remainder of the term.
That's actually a requirement via state statute. It has to be an elector and they have to live within the district.
Well, I understand to be elected, but to fulfill the remainder of a term, if the district, again, I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is going to be, but I'd like to see if the district could look into that.
I think that is, because that was a requirement for myself when I got appointed.
No, it was
that I live in the district.
Okay, cool.
And I want to say it's even written into statute and it's policy that they have to be an elector and they have to live within the district.
And Irma did have to verify with the Grant County.
Sure, yeah. In regards to being elected,
Actually
yeah.
residents, and they were, registered to vote.
Yeah. So yeah, it is written into statute and policy. That's just,
that was it.
There you go. You have a few days to change that.
Okay, moving on to new business. So we talked about the backpack program. I have attorney general complaint, and like I said, I don't have visibility on that either.
So I just wanted to alert the board. I received a couple emails from the Attorney General's office, and I've also spoken with our attorney. We have to provide a response. This is on July 6th. We received an email from the Attorney General's office about a possible violation of the Government Conduct Act. District funds being used to represent board members and not being approved by the board. And then also the district's attorney recommending and selecting the defense counsel. And then also nepotism. So I have to respond.
Could you repeat those three again?
Sure. So district funds being used to represent board members, not being approved by the board. And the district's attorney recommended and selected the defense counsel in the recall election or recall petition, and then nepotism. So I have to respond to those.
So you're just notifying us.
I just wanted to let you know about that. In fact, these are new to me also. I don't know about all these, so I'm going to have to do some research to respond.
Okay. Any comments or questions in regards to? I filed it. Moving on to superintendent's report. I don't believe Mr. Lewis is here. I didn't see him at all today. Anybody?
We just put him on there as a standing item, but I did have a few other things under my report.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
So I put in your packet the board self-evaluation that everybody did recently. Yeah. Well, it was supposed to be in there. If it's not, I apologize.
I have it. It's at the very end.
On this one, on that one, I hadn't seen this one all the way through.
So as you can see from the board self-evaluation, we have a lot of work to do. And I'm optimistic that we're going to make good improvements, but we are in the developing and ineffective phase of the self-evaluation based on those categories. And these categories came from our board policies on the self-evaluation.
I noticed that there are only 4 tallies.
I believe I was here.
Oh, you were here. Okay. Or 3.
So I guess I'll add to that. You've asked me to look into the training for the board self-evaluation. So I spoke to School Boards Association today. They have a module called Effective Boards. It's a best practices for boards. And they said they could do a free virtual session at our next board meeting if you're interested, or another date. And then they have something even further after that that has a similar type of assessment that's done. It would cost us $350, but I think we could do something like this at a work session prior to the next meeting if you were interested, or we could wait.
I would suggest we wait till we fill the 2 positions.
Okay.
Agreed.
And then I just wanted to keep you informed that I'm going to be going to the New Mexico Coalition of Educational Leaders Conference in Albuquerque this week on Thursday and Friday. I'll let you know what that's about, some of the new things that are going on. We talked about Summerfest before. That's our back to school event for students and families. I think we've raised about $22,000 right now to supply backpacks, school supplies, and t-shirts. We have 30 booths so far, and vendors that'll be attending the event.
Wow.
So it's coming along good. We've had a weekly meeting, and it seems to be growing each week.
It's still going to be a Kobe.
Still at the parking lot at the high school. And then another event I want to invite you to also is our Convocation event. A little bit different than it's been done in the past, but that'll be on the 27th from 8:30 to 11.
When?
The 27th of July from 8:30 to 11
At the Fine Arts?
at the Fine Arts, Performing Arts Center.
What is that again, sir? Convocation.
Convocation. So the board president will introduce the board members and say a few things also, and I'll give you more information about that as we get closer. I wanted to update you on a few facility things that we're working on. The boardroom, the old boardroom, I think we're close to getting the repairs done for that boardroom, and we should be able to use that hopefully in the next month and a half or so. The room next to that, I guess we call it the training room. We're going to do some repairs to that and get that in working order also, as well as the special education room on the other side of that. There was some water damage. The roof's been repaired, but there's a few more ceiling repairs and carpet repairs that need to be done. And then there's a HVAC system that needs repaired in the boardroom and in the IT room also. We had a substitute job fair this last Saturday. We picked up 9 more substitutes at the job fair. I think we have about 26 total now substitutes. And I think we have between 12 and 15, or I have about 15 or 16 that are interested as permanent substitutes also. So I think we're coming along pretty well as far as staffing. We need 2 more aides at Hurley. We need a teacher at Central Elementary. We need an attendance coach, which we're going to be interviewing for this week, and then director of operations position. So,
The director of operations position, has that been where the school experience was preferred versus required?
I think we've updated that. Yes.
So it's not preferred? One other question on that. We just went through the policy, and it's had where the person that was going to be the permanent one would have to be available for all schools. And yet you were talking about being assigned to an individual school?
So permanent substitute, we are going to assign to a school.
That's what I thought. And so
unless there's one school has an immediate need that we have to move them over there to help.
Mm-hmm. I know a couple of people that have applied for that position, and they told me that they've been told that they'd have to be available for all the schools all the time.
That might be our part.
Which position are you talking about?
The permanent, it's not listed in the policy, but it's 3rd level.
Substitutes.
This
Substitute teachers.
substitute.
That might be miscommunication on our part. We've been working on this quite a bit lately, so we probably miscommunicated that at our first interview.
So when we talk to the people, we're talking about being assigned to a school, and it's necessary having to go out.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And we're working on that. We've been working hard to make sure we have enough substitutes. So also the fellows program, we had a presentation last time. We haven't gotten the MOU yet or the allocation.
Okay.
It should be soon, but we did get an email saying that if we have over 10, which we have about 15 people interested right now, that they will honor that too.
So that's why we haven't gone to any advertisements, at least outside of the district, like in the newspaper or radios.
We had it in the newspaper. It was sent to them. I said that we did all through the paper. And then,
Was it done as a separate ad or was it done in the classified?
No, it was, application ad. And we had sent to
I'm blind and missed it. That's good.
So we have about 15 right now, and we may be able to get a few more. So it should be very helpful.
and the flyers, everywhere. We had some of our people that were on flyers. Cool. It was Facebook on July.
This on July 1.
We know that we're going to be allocated, I think, around $600,000 for that program.
That's an incredible program, and I'm thinking people will be jumping off the water to that's like I'm wondering, is the word, why aren't people knocking the door down? It's kind of the question.
I do have a state, like that, so that program, the college program, we have to pay for it ahead of time and then be reimbursed.
Yes.
So, you know, we just had the audit and one of the problems was reimbursement and borrowing from other things. So do we have systems in place that can avoid that in the future?
Well,
I don't think we have to pay for it.
Well, it's reimbursed.
it's like your other.
You have to front the money.
Yeah.
We're supposed to stay a month or two, to be, sent back to us, so we do have to put money on private.
So I just want to make sure that there's systems in place. So we don't have this audit finding again next year.
So we're working on that. We met today, finance department to talk about some of those systems.
Okay.
So tomorrow I'm meeting with the fire marshal virtually. As I mentioned, I gave you a long report last time, and our team has done a great job of picking up a lot of those things that need to be fixed. We have some guys coming later this week to repair some of those fire code violations also. But hopefully we'll have most of those things fixed before school starts, if not all of them. I do want to let you know we have a number of transportation issues also that I recently found out about that we need to repair also, but I feel like our team is going to get all those things fixed too.
As in the buses that pick up the kids?
Just as far as compliance with bus regulations and transportation, Montoya Transportation shared those with us on Saturday when they joined us for the job fair.
So it's our buses that or their buses that actually?
Well, we're responsible for the inspections and all of that too.
Oh.
So there's drivers and licenses and things like that, training.
Do we have that recorded at the next meeting, what the non-compliances were?
Sure.
Thank you.
So next week we have a 2-day district cabinet training with our district administrators. We'll have 2 days of training working as a team, similar to what we did with the board as far as creating norms and just our plan for the upcoming year, looking at data and making goals. And then the principals will also meet with me next week and our district admin team to develop goals for the year as well.
And they'll be presented to us to review, or because that's kind of a precursor to the strategic plan, and it should actually be after the strategic plan is done, to set the goals to see how it is that the strategic plan is going to be attained.
What I was thinking was I would present all of the data that we put together, because I'm going to need that for my evaluation as well, which I mentioned a couple weeks ago. And I was asked to hold off on that.
Yeah, until we start.
But I can present the data and I can present the goals that we come up with.
think that'd be good, because out of those goals is how we're gonna come up with objectives for the strategic plan, am I right?
Of course, that's gonna be a while yet. That's not gonna be until November that we're gonna do the strategic plan.
Okay.
But I think we're gonna spend a little bit of time looking at all of the data and developing some goals for the year. That's all that I had to report.
Thank you, Dr. Spota. So, of course, Mr. Lewis is in here. Next item is going to be executive session. So the motion is for a closed session pursuant to limited personal matters as permitted under section 10-5-1H19, the Mexico Greens Act, specifically regarding personal matters, discussion with the superintendent. So at this time, entertaining a motion to move into executive session. Mr. Guadiana moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Murillo seconds. Roll call vote. Myself, yes.
Yes.
Murillo, yes.
7:30.
Executive session at 7:31. Motion? Mr. Guadiana moves, second.
Second.
Ms. Murillo seconds, roll call vote, myself, aye.
Yes.
Motion carries, we're back in open session at, what time?
7:46.
7:46. That moves us to public input. Is there any public input?
Can we put number 8 on there, sir?
Oh, yes, sorry about that. Yes, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think that's
you.
That's you, Mr. Soler. Is it not, or is it me?
Yeah, you just read it.
Okay, thank you. We reconvene in open session at the conclusion of closed session for the statement affirming that no action was taken in executive session and discussions were limited to personal matters only. That moves us to public comment. There's nobody here. Victor, Daniel, is there anybody up there for public comment?
No, sir, no one.
No one? Okay. Items for next meeting, I got those two, Dr. Shaletta. I had the backpack program school selection
for an action item.
for an action item, and then we were gonna discuss with the council in regards to the censure, right? Those are the two things that I had.
Yes, and then, do we want to talk more about appointment of replacement board members?
Yes.
Is it an action item or is it a new business?
Let's just do new business and then we can move it to action item.
It should be action item.
I think we need to come up with a procedure first of all, Mr. Guadiana, and then we can move to that.
Action item would be to advertise for letters of interest. That's how we did it last time. And then the decision as to how we select can be made later on. But at least if we start at this point saying there are 2 vacancies, would be anybody that's interested that lives in the district and is a registered voter can submit a letter of interest.
So what are you suggesting, sir?
That we put it as an action item to announce, to announce the vacancy of and the seeking of candidates to fill that vacancy, those vacancies, to submit a letter of interest.
That sounds good.
I'll do some research on that process too.
Okay.
And then as far as officers, we do need officers for our audit committee and our finance committee, because we are gonna be meeting with the finance committee, and then we're looking at an auditor, so we're gonna need an audit committee too.
So that would have to be an action item, that the board appoints the 2 board
It
members.
has to be an action item.
Yeah. And then when we get new board members, if we want to redo it, we can redo it at that time.
I'll add those as action item for the next meeting. And as well as the censorship and the backpack program. Censorship will be an action item and the backpack program will be an action item.
And you'll have that information from the council, right?
I will, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And do we want to wait until we have 2 new board members to do officers? Or should we do officers so that we have a secretary to sign things?
I think we need to wait. We waited till I got into the board when we reassigned new officers.
So this transportation budget is pretty important. They've asked us a few times over the last month to turn it in.
And I think Terry was gonna talk to them about it, letting them know that we're the situation that we're in. So I will sign it as a president, but I think she was gonna talk to him about why the secretary hasn't signed it yet. Because the thing about it is though, is that we're gonna have to figure out what's going on with the censure before we even go for offices.
Right,
If that
that's
makes
true.
sense.
Yes and no. The censure can be discussed prior to that, and then we could have a vote to reorganize the board, knowing whether that is going to be extended. Currently, it's not. Currently, there is no prohibition for appointment to office as an officer or a committee member. And as we go forward in the committee selection, that needs to happen, especially in the audit committee, relatively quickly.
Could we just appoint a secretary?
I can appoint a secretary. Just as Mr. Just
It was a
Mr.
nomination. Yeah, well, it was a
No, no.
nomination, then it was denied, then
So he ended up
appointed it.
appointing
So
me as
maybe
a
we can,
secretary.
we can make a nomination
So we should do that
And
next.
then that way we could just have our,
At least a
at least a
secretary.
secretary to sign for the
We
thing.
need
And
to
then
do at
when we
least
get
a
our 2 new board members.
Then we can move with the offices.
Mhm.
I think that's good.
Okay, but we should be doing the committees.
Right, that's on the
That's,
agenda.
that's on the agenda as well.
So an action item also to appoint the secretary.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else that I missed, sir? All right. Move to adjourn.
Oh. 7:51.